Dan Smith describes Sunday's track events as community affairs where many young people usually members of local auto clubs, would help by collecting entrance fees, inspecting and classifying cars, conducting races, and most importantly, building cars and racing them, gooning and tuning them to peak performance up until the last moment. Trophy girls tallied points and awarded trophies. There were other car clubs besides the Aurora Autocrats who helped run the track in the beginning, and later the Audettes who pitched in. Other local clubs included the Traction Masters, the Torkers, the Road Angels, the Slam Shifters, the Bearing Busters, the Rod Snappers, and the Illinois Valley Idlers, and the Slixa Seneca, and the Rev Masters of Oswego. Auto clubs from across the country played a key role in the development of drag racing as a professional sport, from California to Detroit and in Oswego also. At about the same time that the Interstate Highway Act passed, authorizing the new interstate road system, two members of the Aurora Autocrats, Dale and Darrell Cutsinger, were encouraging Dan and Wally Smith to build the Oswego drag strip. The pair of brothers knew each other because Dale and Darrell's father was a tenant farmer who worked the fields where the track was to be built. Dan and Wally Smith had inherited the farm when their parents were killed in an automobile accident. In the fall of 1955, the Smith brothers bravely pushed forward and plowed under acres of soybeans to create the original dirt track that ran from north toward the south and Highway 34. Only a few races were run that year, but enough to persuade them to proceed. So in 1956, the Smith brothers borrowed the money needed to pave the track, $25,000. They also reversed the direction of the track, so the races ran north and away from the highway. Everyone who speaks at the drag strip is amazingly enthusiastic about the time and the place and the events. While a few people talk about the noise and the traffic and the smell of burning rubber on Sundays, they still get excited and are even eager to complain about it. I suspect all the while they are proud that they were around when the drag strip operated. Evelyn Dwyer, wife of the former Oswego chief of police, was quoted as saying of the traffic, "I don't know if it was any worse than it is now every day during the week at rush hour. The traffic is terrible all the time now, and not like it was when it was only coming and leaving the drag strip." Periodically, the Oswego Dragway held top 20 meets to generate fan interest and raise funds to send racers to represent the Midwest against West Coast competition. A few years later, the Gold Agency took charge of managing the track and the races. The Oswego Dragway was boasted as the oldest drag raceway in the United States, according to the Gold Agency owner, Ben Christ. Actually, it was the first officially sanctioned NHRA track in Illinois. The Gold Agency commissioned over 100 of the infamous Sunday type radio and television commercials every week heard over top 40 radio stations for Oswego and 7 other of their own tracks that ran from coast to coast, including one in Fontana, California. The Gold Agency also created and published a drag racing publication called the Quarter Mile Countdown. Mailed to 60,000 drag racers each month, according to Bob Doss, general manager of the Gold Agency, and track manager for Oswego from 1965 through 1972. Wally Parks formed the NHRA itself only in 1951. The NHRA held its first officially sanctioned event in April 1953 in Pomona, California, with their local car clubs, the Pomona Choppers, the Grippers, and the Varmints. It was just a couple years later when Dan and Wally Smith flew to Pomona to meet Wally Parks and lay the groundwork for Oswego to be sanctioned by the NHRA. I think they were expecting a couple of farmers in coveralls, according to Dan Smith. So, in 1956, when Wally Parks sent NHRA's field director Bud Coons and his crew counterclockwise around the nation on its third and final safari for regional championships, they made the planned stop in Oswego. The drag safari's mission was to spread the word of safety and standardized rules, all done in coordination with local car clubs. Plymouth had supplied 2 red, white, and blue sets of wheels, a 56 Fury and a 56 Suburban Wagon. The Suburban towed the trailer and held all of the equipment necessary to conduct championship drag races. Clearly, in retrospect, Dan and Wally and Dale and Darrell were visionary in building the track just in time to be part of the wave of enthusiasm for drag racing as it swept the nation. Speaking to me the first time about his deceased brother Wally, Dan Smith said, "You don't want to film me, you want my brother. He was the instigator." Likewise, when Dale Cutzinger and I first spoke about his brother Darrell, he said, "Well, actually, my brother was the instigator in my family." In fact, I have come to believe there were many instigators in the ongoing saga of the Oswego Dragway. Midwest drag racing pioneer Al Thompson. While one could write a book about him, a few notable details include that he was not only a great competitor as a record-setting driver, he was also an innovator as a car builder, racer, and a mechanic, and was known for generously sharing his knowledge, skills, and friendship. Later, Al barnstormed through the booming go-kart industry, manufacturing and racing with the same vigor and success that he found in drag racing. His wire wheels came to be used by nearly every other major chassis building company and numerous famous racers. This included the very first pair off his dragster. Al got his start at 16 racing his Sprint Roadster in 1948. After the association found out about his age, they banned him from further racing. He raced another Sprint Roadster in 1950 under the assumed name of Tom Allen. Late in the racing season, Al crashed at the Peoria Fairgrounds. That's when Al decided that circle racing wasn't the answer, according to the Drag News. So as things came to pass, at about the same time the Smith brothers plowed under their soybeans and opened the dirt track in 1955, Al got back into racing, but this time drag racing. In 1957, Al Thompson's first dragster turned 136.35 miles per hour in 10.53 seconds. When he retired in the mid-60s, he was hitting 195 miles per hour at 7.9 seconds. To put things in perspective, 3 years later, in April 1960, unofficially, Chris Carmesines was the first person to top 200 miles per hour when he turned 204.54 miles per hour in the Chisler at the Alton Dragway in Illinois. At 72, Chris is probably the oldest active professional driver in drag racing today. Not till 4 years later, using nitromethane, now legal at all NHRA events, was Dan Garlitz the first to clock an official 200 miles per hour in the sport in August 1964. Dan Garlitz later set the record for the Oswego quarter mile at 241 miles per hour. That speed was also unofficially matched by Roger Clayton sometime later. And I say ongoing story because many of the participants of those heady days are now, as Bob Baker points out, pillars of the community. And like himself, who restores antique, nostalgic, and exotic sports cars, Bob is still obviously involved in the car business. Bob Mead's a good example. He was hired as a teenager to sell popcorn by a local grocer, Bill Denny, during the races. He had one look at the action and he was hooked on drag racing. He had to wait till he was old enough before he could start racing himself. He also had to take a break to serve in the Army. But when he got out of the Army, he built a car with his friend Jerry Swanson and later his partner Jerry Hippo. He whiles away his time caring for his Mint 65 Corvette Stingray convertible or working as an official with midget cars. And now Bob is on the trail of his old racer. He thinks he knows who bought it from the guy that bought it from the guy and so on. Bob's the one that got me started on this project. The first time I met him, I was admiring his Corvette. He said, "If you think this is something, you need to learn about the Oswego Dragway."
The lower trophies, the small ones, are all from the Oswego drag strip for winning the class, all from more or less street cars. The dragsters, we never got trophies. The upper trophies are all from the World of Wheels car shows. They go all the way around. We also had a car club in town that we all belonged to here in town, Rev Masters Auto Club. And we used to go out there and race, and the guys used to get trophies and show the cars. But basically these all, from here over, are all Oswego drag strip. When I got into the dragsters, then we didn't receive the trophies anymore. We just weren't interested in trophies. We were more interested in the money. We had to pay for the dragsters. And the street cars, we were always broke them and couldn't go to work on Monday morning and fix the transmissions or something. But and from here on, our special awards, we start out here. This is the best engine compartment. The safety award, that was for your safety equipment that you had built in. We go over here. This is the one you always want to win. The top ones are best in the show. That's the best comp car in the show itself. This is the Stuart Warner Award. It's given from the best interior of the show. These other plaques here are from the Quarter Milers Car Club from Tipton, Indiana. Go next to it is Engineering Award. This is an award that I got in Chicago. These next two are championship plaques. This is when I won 61, 62 class. I was in 8 shows. I won 8 first places and 15 special awards. This one here was from 72 to 73, and that was the next year I won the championship. The other 2 small ones is after I got into the midgets and sprint cars. This is from the World of Outlaws midgets. I got that for being on the tech committee and pit steward. And this one here is from UARA, which is a local midget organization in Illinois. This here is probably the hardest trophy I've ever got, or hard to get. This is called a Triple Crown. This is one here I got by restoring a Corvette, the 65 Corvette. You have to win 3 major shows. As it says here, this is the Gold Spinner Award. You get that. Actually, how it started out, I got the Bloomington Gold first, then I got the Top Flight Award, and then I went back and got the Gold Spinner Award, and that's how you get the Triple Crown. The car is judged the way it came off the assembly line, not the way these other ones is the way I wanted to build it. And this one here, you have to have just the way it came off the assembly. Not necessarily the way you got it from the dealer, where you come off the assembly line. That's so you have to have the overspray and all that type of thing.
Eventually, the farmland was sold to neighbor and veterinarian Howard Koch sometime in the 70s, who closed the track in 1979. Here, Dan Smith is joined by Dennis Figgins, Pat Finley, Bob Meade, and myself in Bob's garage.
My brother and I built that. Some friends of ours, it was their idea to try it because they didn't have any place to race except going a long ways. And we tried it 1 year on dirt for about 3 or 4 sessions. And it looked so good then, well, we figured we'd go borrow some money, and that's how it got going.
Did they have porta potties in those days?
Yeah.
Because I never saw.
Yeah, right. I think they
right in the middle of Pittsburgh.
they built. Yeah, they built it right.
Oh, okay.
We built it there, and there was a must have been a
question, but I.
must have been a.
I mean, it wasn't a one-holer, it was a...
Yeah, it must have been a septic tank.
Yeah.
And this was all amateur, like Bob's got. That's what he won, trophies, you know. Now you win what, $2,500 or something, and it costs you $1,000 to get in there to run it, you know. That's how Don Hausler.
Right.
He's still running, and he's 65, 66 years old, and he says it costs so much, I forget what he says. Anyway, he says if I can get up there high enough, or I can come out even, he says I'm just happy, because it costs so much to
I'm
for
laughing
your
because
car
I
or
think Don
something.
had trouble quitting even if he had to sell his house.
I know, yeah.
But you're right, he does feel like if he just breaks even, he's happy.
Yeah, because he likes the life.
That's
you know.
any racer though.
Well, yeah. They like
You
it.
know, you live in t-shirts and on sandwiches so you can race the car.
Right.
Yeah, and he was out of it for how long?
35 years.
Yeah.
My thoughts, because I always liked the engines and transmissions and rear ends and stuff, and watch them work on them at the track and everything. And any other type of racing, you had to be 21 to get in the pits, and it didn't. As long as you stayed out of everybody's way, you could sit there and learn all kinds of things. Sit back and just watch, and they'd work on dragsters, or somebody would work on gassers, and you know, changing transits, clutches, whatever they needed, you know. And I thought that was really neat how they do and how they figured stuff. And, you know, guys like Rich Warburg and Bill Burling and that bunch with the dragsters and like Fox and Couts when they had their dragster. And a lot of them up and down the river, they all had dragsters and stuff, you know. And they always got a certain spot at the track, so you could go there and you knew that there would be a lot going on as soon as you got there. So, yeah, and the other places you had to hunt and miss because they just scattered all over, you know.
Most of them had their own pit spaces like
Yeah.
the race the others.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that was what was kind of neat, you know, the whole thing.
actually, some of the biggest names gone at that time
And
raced
still.
then, and still are. I mean, Garlett's, he was here.
Dartmouth's,
Yeah, he's still going.
Yeah.
We went in the pits, and I seen this guy pinstriping and lettering, and I mean that had something to do with drawing and art and everything. And I always was, you know, that was my forte anyway. Was something to do with art anyway.
And that's your business today,
Yes, sir,
right?
that is. That's what I do today for a living as a sign painter.
Yeah.
That's how everybody knows me anyway. Well, I think in a good sense.
The beginnings of the Oswego drag strip overlapped the end of the Seneca drag strip, an 8th-mile track in Seneca, Illinois. It operated under the rules of the Illinois Valley Idlers Car Club. Here is some great black and white footage Wesley Weinrich shared from a video of the Seneca Drag Strip reunion held in 2004, showing how it looked when it opened to the public in 1955. The track was started by Al Weinrich and his friends. Every car seen would be a prized possession today. A second reunion is planned for April of 2005 on the anniversary of the first one. The Seneca track operated on the paved streets of a housing complex abandoned and later demolished by the military after World War II. The military housed workers who built LST or amphibious landing crafts for transporting tanks during the war. The Seneca track closed in 1957. There are a number of other tracks that need to be investigated and included in this history too. Union Grove, US 30, Half Day, Route 66, Cordova, Byron, and so on. All of the instigators, as I like to describe them, have stories to tell, photos to dig out, trophies to dust off, yellowed newspaper clippings to unfold, treasured mementos and memories to share, and really wobbly 8mm home movies to screen. Like Jack Oslander recently told me about his local car club in Detroit, the Rod Busters or the Bearing Burners or vice versa. Either way, his club took back his car club jacket when he left the club years ago. You weren't allowed to have a jacket if you didn't stay in the club, he said. At the time, he was 6'1" and weighed 140 pounds. Well, they actually gave it back to him after all this time. And even though he has it back now, after all these years, Jack said, obviously actually wearing it will remain a memory. Here's Jim Woodrow, better known as Woody, the well-known race-starting flagman of the Oswego track, takes a short break from watching the Chicago Bears on TV to describe his experiences at the track from his home in Montgomery.
I'm going to jump to a subject you and I talked to briefly on the phone. The way you waved the flag, where did you get that from? Did you model it on some other people, or did you embellish? Did you expand it from what it had been with other people, or how did that evolve?
Now, well, when we were thinking about the stutter, we had a fella in the club named Bob Loudon, who was a sports car driver. And so he knew how they flagged at the sports car races. Like, he'd race at Road America and local tracks around here. But he'd always stand out at the starting line with the flag above his head and then drop it down. And that was the signal to go. So I was thinking how we could make this a little bit better, and that's when I came up with this idea right here. These are in fact the actual flags that he used down the track.
Oh, they are.
And so we start out with the green flag on the ground and point at each one of the drivers.
Okay.
Make sure they were ready,
Okay.
and when we were all set, then raise the green flag, and I got to the point where I'd jump up high. Well, nowadays it's
Catching up with
can't believe how high I got.
you. Yeah.
But
No, I've seen the pictures. It's amazing what you did. I mean, it makes it real interesting. It gets a real flair for the race to start.
yeah, you do that somewhere between 50 and 70 times a day. It was quite tiring. But then the rest of the guys that took over when I take a break, they all picked it up. And we had, I think it was kind of novel for Oswego at that time.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
From about the middle of 1955 on. And then I got a picture down here someplace. I went to the national championship at Kansas City in '56, and they found out that I was there, and they asked me to work with them for a few races. I ended up working about a half hour,
Oh.
but it was quite a thrill and honor for me. Here's a national championship.
Yeah.
Particular picture was taken down at Kansas City, Missouri, 1956, when I was a guest starter, and they asked me to work the starting line for about a half. And this is my car, the 1948 Crosley station wagon. In fact, that was the very first run we ever made with the car.
Very first run.
The wheels came off the ground that far.
What did you have a nickname for your car?
The Misfit.
The Misfit. Okay.
And this is after a day of racing down as we go. There's Al Thompson and Ron Leake and Chris Kermazines and Don Maynard. They were partners on the Chiseler.
Okay.
This was me and my little Crosley out here in my garage. There's another picture of Don Maynard and Chris.
Well, this garage, I don't know if you can see it very well. We rented this little two-car garage from a lady downtown because we had to have a place to work on the cars. And of course, in our own homes, we mostly had one or two-car garages, and the family stuff was there. So we rented this little garage down on Main Street for several years, probably 6-7 years. And a lot of hot rods came out of that garage. And everybody knew where to go. Everybody in town stopped by to visit. It was a social experience. A bunch of young guys messing around with cars. So I'm kind of amazed how many friendships have lasted all my life that came out of that. And this was our race car. We went all over the country in this. It's called an altered coupe because it didn't have any fenders or headlights or anything. So you could theoretically race it on the street, but it's pretty sneaky if you did. And it was probably the most popular class in the 50s. The Ram Chargers raced in it. Some of the big super stock guys of today raced in it. Everybody, it was something you could put together in your garage and go fast. And we were real fortunate to have a group that could put it together and run it.
All right, who are the two suspicious guys sitting beside you and then the two
Well,
guys backing them up?
The guy in the middle down is Carl Tripp. He was influential on getting that started, and he passed away several years ago. This is Garland Davies. He was more of the thinker of the three of us. We were the three owners of the cars, but he was an electronics engineer. He built radios and stuff like that, and so he was real helpful in getting that done. The two guys standing owned the gas station. They sponsored us, gave us a tow vehicle, painted the car for us. But they were real good guys, and they helped us out a lot, kept us going. Just a shot. Al Thompson's guys said we brought more guys to the drag strip with us than any other car there because we had more goons and tire changes. Everybody, that was an expression in the 50s and 60s.
What is it?
Gooning. When you're gooning for somebody, you're helping mechanic, helping change
I
tires.
never heard that one.
Well, that's an old expression.
Really?
So we had tire changers and goons with us all the time. And that way, too, it kept people from picking us. You'd outnumber everybody. Henry Ford finally decided to throw away his right angle triangle when he was drawing cars and started to put some round corners on it. You can see the roof line has got a little bit of a round to it, the front windshield, the back getting away from the Model T, Model A box look. And that was the first Ford that Henry put a V8 in also. And probably of all the hot rods on the road today, most of them are 32 Fords. I've been a 32 Ford fan ever since we owned that car. And here's a board I put together as I found them in a magazine. Just put them up and pasted them up, but look at all the ways you could do a 32 Ford. I mean, flames, boxes, checkerboards, roadsters, pickups. But that grill shell, all the 32 Ford have just a little roundness to the grill that the old Model A's never had. And they're just classic. There's one with full fenders. Boy, that would be, or down here, that would be the epitome of a hot rod today, if you could find anything like that. Most of them are kit cars made out of plastic and aluminum now. But
Well, like you said, there's a streamlining that was distinctive.
that was the first that Henry Ford decided he ought to make things a little bit round. And so it just stuck, and it came along at a good time. Most of the drag strips didn't really get going, or the initial ones didn't get started till right after the war, and that would have made this car 10 or 15 years old, so all the guys coming home from the war had enough money to go buy one of these for 20 or 30 bucks and take the fenders off, take the headlights off, and go out and race them. Most of the guys in California did it out on the dry lakes first, on it and use it for a pulley. Or
I mean, I'm no expert, but I mean, they look perfectly modern. All these.
there is something modern about them, isn't
look,
it? Just
fresh.
the way they sit, yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
Okay. Well, this car, well, this is the same thing. When we had our race car, our sponsors had a variety of little trucks to tow it around with, and that one was called the Witch Doctor. You remember the rock and roll song, The Witch Doctor? Well, it was a little short truck that, but this picture does have a story behind it. This is I let somebody else drive my Model A, my street car, and on Wednesday nights over at the Oswego Drag Strip, when it was closed, in the summertime, tons of cars showed up just to grudge race, match race, and I know Wally Smith was sitting over in his living room watching. And so we just take over the track and start racing each other until dark, and then a couple guys got stupid and wrecked cars there, so he had to put the gate up. But for a couple years, on Wednesday night, guys would come clear out from Chicago to see who they could drag race with.
Really?
And Aurora was always a great street racing town. They always had a lot of guys around that loved to go fast, and maybe not necessarily wanted to come to the drag strip, but they wanted to let everybody know they had a fast car. So they'd show up there on Wednesday night. No timing tower, no safety equipment, no anything, but at least it was off the street.
Right.
So that was what was going on in that. That was a good picture.
Who's that called? What is that car?
This is a Model A Cabriolet. It had a overhead valve Ford V8 in it. It was a terrific little street machine. We don't say too much about street racing, but this was the king of the stoplights. It had some parts off the North Aurora squad car on it, 3 deuces. Al Thompson fixed me up with that because he souped up the squad car so they could go chase us. And then when they bought a new car,
Really?
I bought the 3 deuces off it to put on my Ford car.
So he was working both sides of the road.
That was me at 19. I just couldn't get enough racing. I was racing the drag car. I was out in the street racing, and that's the way a lot of guys are today.
Tell me the story that, as long as you don't feel like you're going to get rubbed out.
Well, this story is a great story. This probably was 1959 or 60, and you can see these dragsters line up, the best top fuel cars outside of California, and of course we thought they were still the best cars. Chris Carmesani's in the Chisler, Don Garlitz in the Swamp Rat, Bob Sullivan in Pandemonium, guy named Langley, guy named Wichita Al, and there's a Cangalosi. Well, Lou Cangalosi was a mafiosa in Kansas City. This is the story I've been told. And he thought his son's car was the fastest of all, so he invites them, you all come to Kansas City, we're going to have a drag race. He didn't care if spectators come, he put up the money, he gave them all money to come, give them, I think, $1,000 to the winner. So the best cars in the whole Midwest or anywhere in the country outside of California showed up. And they had at it, and I really wish I knew who won, but I'm not too sure who it is. I would have guessed Carmesani's, but I'm a Carmesani's fan, so that's why.
Okay.
I liked Chris as a driver because he wouldn't quit for anything. And this is another picture of Carmesani's car. Interesting thing about this is got Al Thompson. You were asking me, Al was a pretty good sized guy. Next to him is Ron Leake, who owns the track up at Byron now. And then next to that is Chris Carmesani's, Don Maynard, his partner, Bud Roach, one of the guys that helped work on the car. But back to this one, this is hanging in the NHRA Museum in Pomona, California. A big 4x8 blow up of it. And also Ron Leake, that owns the Byron track, is in that picture too.
Right.
He was around. He was there, omnipresent. We call him Mr. Lucky.
And I'm going to have you explain to me what this car is.
Okay. This is a bracket car, we call it. We handicap race. It's got a lot of electronic features that kind of tends to drive you nuts. It's got an onboard computer called a delay box. Our purpose is we love to go fast. We wouldn't be drag racers if we didn't love to go fast, but this handicap racing really has saved the sport, in my opinion. Otherwise, it would be just whoever could spend the most money would be the winner. So we've kind of evened it out. This is probably in the faster group of bracket cars. It has 2-speed automatic transmission. It's got a 468 cubic inch Chevy big block with gas carburetor. It's a pretty exotic setup, and most of us refer to this as motor on a stick because it's a motor and 2 big tires. The rest of it's somewhat incidental to the car, just enough to hold it on the track, make it go straight. It has a parachute to stop with, but we don't normally use it. It goes about 170 miles an hour in 8 seconds flat. It's a lot of fun. It's quite a bit of work to maintain it and keep it going, but it's just one of those things, I guess, gets in your blood and you got to keep doing it. And the modern day, normally at a big race we have 5 classes. So only 5 guys go home with a smile on their face. When I was racing back in the 50s and 60s when Oswego first opened, we had 40 classes. So 40 guys got to go home with a smile on their face. So it's very competitive now. It's so much fun to get up and get staged, get in the light. Concentration is the biggest thing. You've got to keep your mind if the guy in the other lane blows up, you can't even pay attention to that. You still got to watch where you are and how you're staged and pop the button and go.
Do you want to explain to me about the button?
Well, the button is a controller of when the car launches. It's just a little button on the electronic button on the steering wheel, but it's attached to the automatic transmission. What it does is when you're sitting there in low gear ready to go and you push the button on, it puts it into reverse also. And this is all fluid drive. It can't move. It's trying to go 2 directions at once. So you can bring the revs up on the engine, really get it ready to fly, be standing on it, and when you let go of that button, all hell breaks loose.
Well, explain to me you about the, if you don't mind, the handicapping and the Christmas tree. How you got it?
Okay, well, on this dial board here, everyone has one of these on their car. This one right now is set for my 8th mile racing, which I did last. So what I'm saying is in 5.11 seconds, I'm going to get across the track. The guy in the other lane has a dial board also, and let's say his said 6.11 seconds. Well, that would mean the computer up at the timing tower at the track is going to give him a 1 second head start on me. Theoretically, if we both do everything right and we're both perfect, we'll have a dead heat at the end. However, in these days of computers, they go out however many places it'd take to find out who the winner is. There's no ties. It would go out probably 5 places if it had to. So at 170 miles an hour, I've been in a lot of races where we're 6 or 8 inches apart at the end, so it's pretty hard to judge who won. Usually we both think we won, but the computer tells the whole story. So getting the car out in the morning, getting started, everybody has to be perfect on their air pressure in the back tires. You want to make sure the car is full of fuel, full of water every run. It's got to be checked every run because the car's got to weigh exactly the same or it won't run the same. We're dealing with a thousandth of a second. A friend of mine says a second is a long time until you break it into 1,000 parts. And then it's a pretty short time. So we tend to be real critical of ourselves and our car. On 100th of a second, that's not good enough. You got to get down into the thousandths. And so every little thing changes. If we get delayed, the air changes from morning till afternoon, the track heats up. So all those things enter in. So it becomes real technical. The old days when you just floored it and went to the end as fast as you can, that was a lot of fun too, but like I said, that was only for whoever is willing to spend the most money. And the car, you'll notice the front wheels are very small. There's not much weight up here. And there's a little bit of a stagger to them. That one's 2 inches ahead of this one because when we stage into the light beams, we want to make sure they're both covered. So the car kind of looks like it isn't in line, but it was designed that way.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Saints going
And
on
it's a 235-inch wheelbase. It's a long car, but it's only made to do one thing. That's go straight. You can't come up around and whip around the corner because you'll flop it over. But
it's kind of like an oval track car that just made to make right turns.
right,
Is it left turns?
you can't make any turns unless you're almost stopped.
All right, we're started. Go ahead.
And it's a lot of fun to drive. A lot of people look in there and say, "Ooh, that looks a little confining," but you don't want a lot of room to move around in. It's a one-passenger vehicle. We don't go to the grocery store in it, so we have to have everything within reach. This is the most important thing. It's called the delay box. It's a little computer that can make adjustments on how long it takes the car to launch and how my reaction is. If I'm off that day, I can adjust it, or if the air changes radically, I can make an adjustment that way too.
Champion in top alcohol funny car in 94 and 95. How many of you know this? That at one time, Tim Wilkerson started out in all of this as a bracket racer and used to come to the big events here at Byron. Crew members today will include, and this is how far away, you're going to be amazed as to how far away some of these guys come from. Ron Boyd, Hillsboro, Illinois. John, De Phillips of Tonawanda, New Jersey. Jack Goodwin, Nokomis, Illinois. Jeff Jacobs, Holmes Beach, Florida. Stu Lubert, Lake City, Minnesota. Tommy Meyer, Springfield, Illinois. Tommy, and I can't quite make this one out, Rio Medina, Texas. And Jimmy Vance of Sharon Center, Ohio. Absolutely incredible as to where these crew members come from. So that's the crew with Tim Wilkerson. Okay, we've got Howard Schluter of Crosley, actually from Verona, Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. Howard Schluter owns and operates an accounting firm in Madison, Wisconsin. His opponent is Don Hostler of Plano, Illinois, who is a cement contractor in Plano, former member of the Kendall County Board, a politician, this is a rarity, who decided to go straight. All right, Hostler in his old car must be having the new car painted or whatever.
I thought it was different.
Don Hostler, Plano, Illinois, and here in the Tower Lane with the Ellis Manufacturing teal green, very fast car. This could be low elapsed time here. Super Howard Schluter! And Howard, just that car working perfectly coming out of the gate, and he has a 490. So, what does that all mean? 478. Kelly Spears so far is the guy that's going to be tasting the tasty, big, fat, oversized cheeseburger, Mr. Hodge. The one you wish you had in your hands.
You're right.
Yeah, especially when you consider the fact that he's going to get it for nothing. Okay, this is Michael Schluter across.
Obviously, besides L. Thompson, there are many other instigators out there who should be covered in future chapters. For example, here's the beginning of an interview with Bob and Rich Tinsley at the Riverview Diner in Montgomery. Unfortunately, Bob and I wandered off the subject on the restoration of old cars.
That's what I was kind of getting. What has changed? Just the technology of the tires, clutches, or
Anyway,
Right.
Now he gave me some background on how he got started. Now you've gotten involved in, obviously,
I'll tell you a short story and you can edit it all out.
okay.
But I've liked drag racing ever since I was a little kid. A little kid being 8, 9, 10 years old because I used to buy Hot Rod magazine and things like that from the corner grocery store. When I was 12 years old, which is 1960, Don Garlett stopped at a gas station at the end of my alley where I lived to change the oil on his Swamp Rat 3, 4, 5, whatever it happened to be, the first one that went over 200 miles an hour. And I saw this car and I was just gaga goo goo over the thing, and I ran down there to look at this and I talked to Don, and I had seen him in a magazine already, so I knew who he was, and I wanted an autographed picture. Well, back then Don charged 25 cents for autographed pictures. And in 1960, 12-year-old kids did not have 25 cents in their pocket. So I had to run home and promise my mom and dad the world to get 25 cents off. And I bought this picture that he signed. I've been influenced by him ever since then. I got a funny car in 1977. I started running funny car. And in 1980, Don Garlett was at Great Lakes Dragway for the month of the PRO. It was supposed to be one weekend race, but it rained so much it ended up being a month. So we call it the month of the PRO. Don Garlett was there. I found this picture. I had him sign it in 1980. Well, bought the track from Bob, in 1995, and the first guy that I hired to run there was Don Garlitz, and he ran on Labor Day weekend in 1995. I had him sign that picture. This year is going to be the 50th anniversary on Labor Day weekend. I still have this picture. Don Garlitz is the first guy I hired in to be at our track for the Labor Day weekend 50th year deal. I'm bringing that picture back, and I'm getting him to sign it again.
Are you ever going to ask him for your 25 cents back?
No, it was the best 25 cents I ever spent. It provided a lifetime of entertainment and enthusiasm, and it taught me that I could do what I wanted to do, not only what I had to do.
Oh, that's a great
And that's how I'm involved in racetrack.
Now, how'd you meet this bashful gentleman?
It was 1964. I had a 1952 Chevy 6-cylinder 303, and the very first day after I got my license and my parents didn't know where I was going, I went to Graylick's Dragway and ran it on the track. And then, of course, every car show, World of Wheels car show that was ever around when I was old enough to get to it, Bob was there, so I knew who Bob was. And I knew where Graylick's Dragway was, and I wanted to go there every opportunity that I could go.
Everybody says, gee, you're a legend. I may be in promoting and things like that. I was lousy as a racer. I'll tell you two legends right to my right. And I'm a nationally known legend, Chris the Golden Greek Carol Mercedes, who set the first drag race in history on nitro over 200 miles an hour. 204, am I correct?
Still 4.54?
Down in Alton. I remember that, and this is before anybody was near 200 miles an hour. He's been the king of the sport, and this man here, even at his middle age, he is still driving 300-mile-an-hour dragsters, running NHRA, IHRA tracks all over the country.
52. There's a newspaper article I said must have an error.
Yeah, it was an error. Yeah. They mixed the numbers.
Now, who's his buddy here?
Jack Ditmars. First of all, famous Jack Ditmars. You're right. Jack actually toured on the Greek's car years ago, and he is a showman. Not the fastest, not 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
190.
The little screamer, the mini brute, Opal, Ford. The Opal is mostly.
They both are.
Anyway, everybody, when you advertised Jack Ditmars, the little screamer, people wanted to come out and see him. You can't take it away from the top speed. This man here, back in 1958, raced at Great Lakes Dragway, a legendary Great Lakes Dragway, against probably one of the kings of the dragsters, Big Daddy Don Garlitz. They turned 187.50 miles an hour.
Your memory's pretty good, man.
Remember that? The reason I remember that is because when they turned that, ETs weren't mentioned, but the speed, that speed, and I wanted to advertise the two fastest dragsters in the world coming back. So I went over and had a meeting with the Greek.
Yeah, Al was a pretty good sized guy. He was pretty burly. And he drove midgets, he drove sprint cars, he drove motorcycles. You just make a way for it to do that. This car is somewhat of a larger car. My first dragster, I just couldn't hardly get in and out of it. And it was a little uncomfortable, but I did it because it was racing. This car is a lot more comfortable. Most drag racers, the big name guys, aren't very big guys. Like IRL cars, they got to be a small person. But occasionally a big guy comes along and is determined to do it, so you make the car fit. I still think the weight would make a difference, but we've got the delay box and the way, because we're doing handicap racing, we can make adjustments for that.
That's right, because you said it's all calculated
Right.
into the...
So a little guy in a little car should be faster than a big guy in a little car, but in our what we're doing here, we can make adjustments for that. Later on in the 50s and 60s, he hired a guy to come and drive for him, so he mostly was the motor guru. But he sure was a sharp guy and knew all the angles, how to prepare a car, how to set it up, and how to make it run for the given conditions of the day. They all went to the Hemi engines, but the street racers and the everyday racers stuck with the Chevys. And I've always liked the Chevys. They're easy to work on, they're cheap. Fords and Chryslers are, hopefully they'll catch up someday, but they haven't yet.
You can't do that. Okay.
In front of the car, it says, "Thanks for the inspiration, Carl Tripp and Alan R. Thompson." Carl was very influential in my life when I was a teenager, one of my older friends, and he got me started in drag racing. Al Thompson was Al's speed shop, North Aurora, Illinois, and he was the guru of the street riders, drag racers, everybody, because he was experienced in all phases of racing. The little GA there is a friend of mine, Gary Allen. He passed away this year too.
Racing, of course I was racing street cars and those kind of cars, which, you know, that's fun. But what I really remember is the very first day firing up the dragster for the first time.